What No One Taught Us, Part 2, continuing with the effect of inflation. With higher inflation, one needs to seek out higher interest and growth rates just to stay still. Now, there are two measures of inflation used in Britain. One is Retail Price Index, and the other is Consumer Price Index, RPI and CPI for short. Both of these measure a basket of goods, the same basket of goods, month in, month out. And the Retail Price Index includes housing costs, and the Consumer Price Index excludes housing costs amongst the basket of goods. So as I speak, we currently have the RPI index at 5.2% and CPI at 4.5% here. But to just stand still, if you're a taxpayer at 20%, basic rate taxpayer, looking at the Consumer Price Index of 4.5%, you actually need to seek out interest rate of 5.6%, recognizing that you're going to be taxed on the interest that you earn. Now today, there is really no bank or building society offering anything like 5.6%. And indeed, if you are a higher taxpayer at 40%, then you'd be needing to seek out something of 7.5% interest paid just to stand still, recognizing that inflation is running at 4.5%. So, with higher inflation, we're needing to seek out higher growth rates. But the other important thing is to recognize the importance of tax-free investments, such as ISAs, individual savings account, where the interest that is earned is tax-free, although there is a maximum sum that you can invest in these each year. So if we have a look at what the rolling inflation has been historically over a 10-year period, we can see that it has fluctuated significantly from the sort of 1970 to 1980 period. It reached a peak. Over the 10-year period, it was nearly 80% inflation over the 10 years. For the last sort of 20 years, it has been around about 25% over 10 years. But that's pretty substantial if we consider that over 20 years, any money that you have will have actually have halved in value. And that is the danger of inflation, is that it undermines our savings. Having said that, it is actually a friend of the debtors, because it actually reduces the debt, because what you actually owe somebody else is worth less over time. Here we are looking at compound growth, taking inflation into account. We looked at compound growth in an earlier seminar, and we looked at how potentially we could make savings of up to £140 per month without potentially too much difficulty. So if we stay with that amount of £140 saving, which equates to £4.67 per day, if we say over the long term we can expect to get 5% interest rate per annum. I know that's not available today, but over the long period of term it hopefully will be. Then, that being the case, over 10 years we will have saved £21,700, 20 years £57,000, 30 years £114,000, and over 40 years a huge £208,000. Now, we know inflation is wicked for savers, so we want to counter that to some degree. So, recognising that actually £140 per month is going to be worth less over time, and recognising that hopefully we'll get pay increases or find a new job and earn a little bit more, then let's just say that we'll look to increase our monthly savings by 4%. So in year two we'll move from £140 per month savings to £145.60. Now, the 5-year inflation rate between 2005 and 2009 averaged 3.2%. Currently it's above that, but if we let us say that over the long term it's going to average at 3.5%, that would appear to be quite realistic. That being the case, our savings will be actually worth, in say 10 years time, not 25,650, our savings would actually be worth £18,500. And over 20 years, not £80,000, but actually that money will be worth, in terms of spending power, £41,000. And over 40 years, not £386,000, but actually spending value of £100,000, just over. But still, a substantial sum of money. And certainly we can then, in this model, which is available in the download tool from Manage Money for Life, we can then sort of say, well, actually, I think I could save a little bit more per year. Let's assume I could save 5% per annum, and maybe I could be a bit smarter, and maybe I can secure a higher interest rate or a better growth rate elsewhere, let's say 6%. And so we can see what the net savings will be over X number of years, as we can see here. Now let's move along to comparing prices. This is something which we should be doing on a regular basis, because the pennies do mount up into pounds, and the pounds do mount up into something very much more substantial. So here, a few assumptions before we look at some of the savings. We are assuming that we could earn interest, or our capital growth would grow by 5% annually, that our annual mileage, if we've got a car, is 12,000 miles, and the average fuel consumption of our car is 35 miles to the gallon. So that just relates to our fuel cost down here. So here we look at home insurance, and you're able to amend this example in the downloadable tool, but I've just entered some potential savings, which are quite reasonable. Is £100 savings if we shopped for improving our home insurance per annum. And electricity, if we changed electricity supplier, we could potentially see maybe savings annually of £100. And then gas, oil, clothes, etc., and things like that. Fuel are quite modest, just 4p a litre, and then you can add your own. But what we can see is the savings per week, nothing much to write home about, and the savings over 10 to 40 years. Current mortgage, average mortgage in Britain is around about 150,000, and they generally are for 25 years. If we were able to improve or reduce the interest rate we're paying on our mortgages, recognizing that there are the associated costs, arrangement costs and exit costs as well today, which are increasing, but assuming they are like for like, and it is all about the interest rate, if we were able to reduce interest rate by 1%, we'd see savings of £29, just under £29, and savings over the 25 years, although it says 30 years here, it would be 25 years, of £37,500. And there are some savings on current accounts and savings account, and the total savings here in these examples amount to some £100,000. So this is quite a quick little way of identifying some savings that you could potentially make, and they represent a substantial sum of money over the course of the years. We certainly recommend you shop around, and there are lots of price comparison and good comparison websites, and these are just a few of them, but there are plenty of other excellent ones which can be found on the internet as well. So here we're looking at some quick and easy savings, some 8 items which could represent savings of £7 each day, amounting to £210 during a month. So if we look at the top one, cafe latte, americano, there are various nice coffees and teas which we might be having on a daily basis. Let's say we have them sort of during one a day during the working week, and they cost £2, which is about the price of some of them. If we cut those out, there'll be a saving of £40 per month. If we're currently buying sandwiches at a cost of £3 or more, but let's say £3, 5 a week, that amounts to £60. A can bottle or drink of £1, that's £20. A chocolate bar, only 50p, but that represents £10 over the month. Cutting down a bottle of wine, not to say we're cutting them all out, but just one reduction per week, would amount to £20 over the month. A can of beer, £20. Cutting down a magazine, one a week, £4, that equates to £16. Eating out, still eating out, but not quite as regularly. Cutting one of those out, maybe saving £20. And national lottery packs, reducing that as well. So all told, they're not incredible sort of savings in themselves, but they all amount to something quite substantial, and £210 is a lot of money each month. So what we are looking at here is what you can save in a bit more detail. And this is a tool which is in the Manage Money for Life download interactive tool, and you can amend any of the yellow boxes to personalize it. And what we see here is the average spend per week, and here we've got lottery, we've got £3, and what we believe we can reduce that spend to over here, which I've got naught. The coffee, tea, pastries, breaks, etc. currently spending, let's say, £10, believing we can reduce that down to £2.50. Lunch, obviously you still need to eat, but perhaps we don't need to buy those sandwiches, we can actually make them ourselves, so there's a reduction of 50% there, and so on and so forth. So we can quickly and easily sort of see where and how we can make the savings, and you can overtype these for any additional ones as well. Here we're looking at £7 savings a day. These are the savings, how they mount up over 10, 20, 30 and 40 years. This is our spend, and these are the savings over to the right under the green columns. Potential savings over 10 years is £25,000. Over 40 years it represents over £100,000. Now if we were investing these savings and not spending them at 4% interest or growth rate, these savings could amount to £248,000 over 40 years. Now this doesn't take inflation into account. If inflation was about 3%, we'd see savings of around about £75,000. And a pension from £248,000 could give us a pension of about £18,000. Now that doesn't take inflation into account. If inflation is about 3%, it would be about £5,500 in today's money. But we can see that just some modest changes to our lifestyle without significantly changing it, we can actually make savings, create investments, and create a substantial sum for our future. And here are a few more ways to save. Always use multiple comparison websites. Always seek out a mortgage broker that has access to the whole of the market. Check the competitiveness of the following: cash ISAs, savings, car, household insurance, electricity, gas supply and telephone supply. Look to perhaps reduce consumption of ready-made meals and shop at some cheaper alternatives. And that brings us to an end for for this seminar. If you'd like to click on the next seminar in your own good time, thank you very much.